Hello everybody. Welcome to the
Yeah.
PVLF Authors Marathon 2024. Today's session is Personal Journeys, Collective Impact, Embracing Diversity, Mental Health, and Identity. And the theme of the session is mental wellness. And we have two prestigious authors with us. The first is Abhishek Anicca. He's a bilingual writer, poet, and spoken word artist. He identifies as a person with locomotor disability and chronic illness, which shapes his creative endeavors. He's the founder of Dislang, a digital magazine that publishes narratives by disabled people, a mentor for the South Asian Speaks Fellowship, and has guest edited for Agents of Ishq. His non-fiction work has appeared in the Times of India, DNA, Outlook, The Equator Line, The Third Eye, The Quaint, Unbiased, and many more. And like his poetry has appeared in Nether Quarterly, Gulmohar Quarterly, Alipur Post. I read their poems, by the way. They are very good, and so I'm quite impressed with your work. And next we have K. Vaishali. K. Vaishali is the author of Memoir Homeless, Growing Up Lesbian and Dyslexic in India, and the novella Means to an End. Her short fiction, published in Gertrude Published Sahitya Academy's Indian Journal, out of print and elsewhere, made the Leicester Wright Short Story Prize 2021 shortlist and the 2021 Disquet International Literary Prize longlist. She works for a tech company where she writes developer documentation for their products and leads their LGBTQ plus ERG for the JPEG region. She is the host of the podcast Queerious Connections, available on Spotify and Amazon Music, which I will also listen to it because I'm also interested in these things. Okay, so let's commence our session. And the first question would be, both of you touch upon the intersectionality of identity, including aspects like queerness and caste. How do you see the interconnectedness of various identities influencing mental wellness, and how can literature contribute to unraveling these complexities? Oh,
Well,
Abhishek,
yeah.
start.
I think one of the things is that all of these identities makes for a very complex narrative. For example, I have not only I'm a disabled person, I'm a person with a disability, but within that, I'm a person who was born with a rare disease, which is Vater syndrome, and which caused lifelong disability and illness. So I'm part of different communities in that way. I'm part of the rare disease community. I'm part of the chronically ill community. I'm part of the disabled community, locomotor disabled community, and disability community in general. And that produces a lot of complex identities. It's not simple. And of course, that complexity even becomes deeper when you go across caste or gender. So that is the understanding which I come from. That complexity often puts you in a place where you have to take your narrative into your own hand in some ways, and you are the person who can tell your story. You are in a unique. I think every disabled person has their own bodily and societal experiences. So Vaishali has their own. I have my own, and in that sense, it makes it makes puts us in a unique position where you can tell your story and also tell a larger story of social alienation and discrimination and things like that. So I think that influences a lot of what I write and a lot of what I publish, and it also affects a lot of my mental health. And because the thing is, it is on paper it is easy to say I belong to this community, it is I belong to this community, but everyday living with these identities is very complex. For example, you have to uh, work around your families, you work around your caregiver. You need a caregiver. I'm ill for long periods of time. When you're bedridden for 5 6 months, which I have been in the last few years, then it becomes very difficult to manage your mental health, because as soon as you recover, the first thing you think about is living life to its fullness. But you realize your body is not the same. You can no longer live life to its fullest. So you have to, maybe your walk needs to be For example, earlier I used to walk 5,000 steps or 8,000 steps easily every day. Now I walk only 3,000 steps, and that also takes a toll. It takes a toll on my physical well-being, and which affects my mental well-being. It also affects how I look at myself, how I look at myself as a person, my personhood. So I think in that sense, all of these identities, and it affects my how I date, it
Yeah,
affects how I see myself in terms of as a queer person, because
yeah,
my queerness is comes from not the place of I claimed my queerness through disability. I because I was disabled for a long period of time, and I couldn't fit into heteronormative structures. I couldn't fit into the normative idea of pleasure. So what I had to do is to work around that and to see how I don't fit in the normative. And of course that takes a toll. Even if you claim that space, what happens is that you feel alienated, you don't
yeah,
fit in anywhere. So that not fitting in anywhere becomes the constant theme of your life. And that, because the society around you is so normative, you're constantly being made to feel like you don't fit in, you don't fit in.
yeah. You're not doing
And
enough.
yeah,
Yeah,
you are not doing enough,
anyway,
you
yeah,
are not, yeah. So you're constantly feeling like you don't belong anywhere, actually, despite all of these tags. And that takes a toll in mental health itself.
yeah. Actually, I'm myself a queer. Like I identify as a bisexual. So, like what you said, like we don't fit in anywhere. I feel that like while growing up, like I can't imagine both of your lives. Like, but like I'm sharing mine. But like while growing up, I had different choices than the typical woman, like the society consider,
Yeah,
and like I have different style and I have different everything. I have quite a different. So like my even my parents and even the people around me, like they used to judge me a lot, like why your choices are like this and why do you behave like a girl or everything. So I can
yeah,
really relate to that we really can't able to fit in, especially I think in the setup of India. Like we have very deep rooted culture and deep rooted,
yeah,
because of that culture we have very deep rooted issues as well. So that's why
uh,
we can't be flexible like with people's choices. So
yeah,
that's really irritating, and I can totally relate to
yeah.
you.
I'm
And
sure like
yeah,
it's even more difficult for Vaishali because she's a
yeah,
woman and she has to navigate all of those societal expectations also. So
yeah,
I think it gets much more, even if we are reclaiming those identities and we are saying that, okay, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, it doesn't make life easier for us being disabled, because as soon as you become disabled, there is social alienation which takes place. Because all my friends, for example, are married, have kids, are well adjusted in society. So where does that leave you? Even if you write a book, even if you do everything, your social life doesn't change. Your how people see you in society doesn't change. How people around you perceive you doesn't change. So that becomes the crux of your life, and that takes a toll.
yeah, so true. So,
And
Vaishali, what's your take?
yeah, I think talking about the literature of all, I think you all have covered the other aspects. But for me, when I mean, I don't think I could have imagined writing my book in those intersections because it's so intimidating. Because I myself was making connections between how my disability affects my gender, how my gender affects my sexuality, and how, my relationship with my body changes everything. And for me, a lot of my identities are invisible. So, my disability is invisible. Sometimes my gender is also invisible. I get misgendered a lot. So it's like,
Same,
and
same.
yeah, and my sexuality also, like, I think people don't assume that I'm queer and they assume that I'm straight, which happens to a lot of people, right? So for me, it wasn't easy to make connections because it's not just invisible to others, it's invisible to myself as well. And I could tell each and every part of my identity was influencing every part of my life. Like, if I think of myself, my identities as a cake, I couldn't slice the queer parts neatly and the disabled parts neatly or the gender parts neatly. It was all a mess.
Hmm.
So when I was thinking about writing, like, I don't think so. When I started writing my book, Homeless, which is about these identities, I didn't think I would write a memoir about, my life because if I had thought that, I would have never written the
Sorry.
book. I was just writing whatever, I was just entertaining myself at that point. Like it was more like therapy for myself. I couldn't afford therapy, so I was just writing about my life, thinking, that would make me feel good, and I could, sort of figure out different aspects of what happened, why it happened, and all that. And that's how I started writing my book. And I think that's where it's really hard, because of how interconnected these identities are. It becomes so difficult to write about it. I don't know how Abhishek went through that process of deciding to write and like figuring that out. But for me, the decision to create that book came after I wrote the book, and I realized that I'd written about these identities.
I think it was the same for me actually. It's
Wow.
form of an, I often say it's a form of catharsis, because
Yeah.
for me, when I was ill, the only thing I could do was to write, and I often wrote. I wrote poetry, I wrote essays, because in fact these essays have been written over the last 7 8 years. So it
Mm.
was as I'm falling ill and recovering, and I'm writing these essays. It's almost as to
Yeah.
yeah, entertain myself, and also to reassure myself that there is something ahead of you. So it was a lot of that, I think. And of course it culminated into a book, but the process was just about writing one essay, and just also understanding your life, where you are. It's
Yeah.
very difficult sometimes, because all of this illness, disability, social perception, everything, queerness, everything, sexuality, dating, everything takes a toll. So you are like lost.
And I heard about narrative therapy very late, and I realized that I'd been doing that all my life. Like writing has been where, I
Yeah.
decompose everything.
Yeah,
So it is very interesting that, mental wellness that I was giving myself created this book,
yeah.
so to say.
So, like, actually, I'm also a writer.
Mhm.
So, I also write whenever I feel like. So, I can relate to that also. Like, it declutter your thoughts and everything. So, it really helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, let's come to the next question. What challenges have you encountered in bringing forth your unique narratives in your journeys? And how do you balance personal authenticity and broader societal expectations? Like, of course,
Yeah,
your
I don't think I'm able to manage broader societal expectations. I've given up on them. And I reject them now. So I no longer adhere to them, and I definitely think that they're useless. I can't. Basically, no matter how hard you try, I can never fit into the normative. I can never be normal again. So when you can't be normal, I think it's better to be your authentic self. You're better to talk about the life you have lived. Of course, I would like to write fiction. I would like to write all of these things. uh, while being authentic, a writer is a writer. They don't need to just talk about their lives. They can talk about anything. And I have varied experiences. I've grown up in a small town. I have lived in different cities. So I think there's a lot to tell. But that said, I don't want to fit into any kind of social expectations, because the social expectation also is that this is, as a writer, this is my defining game, that I can talk about myself. But I think, and Vaishali, she definitely writes short stories and write fiction. And I'm sure, like all of us we don't want to be just, a representative writer, and
Mhm.
tokenistic thing.
Yeah.
You want to be a writer, you know.
Yeah. I think this life has prepared me to not give whatever for like societal expectations, because if I had really cared about societal expectations, I wouldn't be here, honestly. Like the kind of pressure that was put on me to express my gender a certain way, or to be able-bodied, or to be straight, it would have broken me by now if I had if I really put that kind of care on what society thought. And because my entire life prepared me for not doing that, it was easier to be authentic, I guess, because of that rebellion that I had from the start. And yeah, my book, for example, like doesn't even follow the structure that memoirs are supposed to follow. Like I'm like, I don't even care about what writing society thinks. Like forget the larger society, right? I mean, I'm just gonna do my thing and we'll see. So yeah, that's just been my that unfortunately has been the kind of approach I had needed to bring to my life and then to my writing. It's just something that was for survival for me.
Yeah, I think, in fact, the writing world also is like very hesitant to allow these narratives to, because
Hmm.
in the beginning, most of my I used to write about other things. They used to get accepted, but personal essays, they had a very rough ride. They were
Yeah.
rejected initially by everyone because people think they don't have there's no space for it, and because they think they are, because they have led so normative life, they don't think our stories are important,
Yeah.
and that's why perhaps it becomes very important for us to tell our stories, because otherwise we will there's no one going to facilitate that process. No one is going to come and say, "Okay, okay." For example, Vaishali talks about invisible disability. With me, the personal experience of Dislang was that when I started Dislang, most of the people who started writing for it were people with invisible disabilities, because they had till now, they don't find many avenues to express themselves, many publications where they can write about these experiences. There's so many people with different kind of heart diseases and fibromyalgia, depression, who can't find an outlet where they can write about their lives, and it always becomes a, like the whole mental health discourse, or a whole disability discourse, or whole learning disability discourse, but it's never actually about, what is it like to be a disabled person or a queer person. So it's always like some vague, idea of what should we do to benefit disabled people.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's always told, those stories are told through that gaze most of the time because,
Yeah, yeah.
we are so caught up in explaining ourselves because we are so misunderstood that, that's the first thing I did. Like, I'm not going to explain what it's like to somebody because I don't want to write for the people who are not part of my community. I want to write for myself and for my community. And that becomes hard. And even now, this writing is called niche writing. Like, it's not really mainstream. So you will see even the publishing houses treat it that way. So it's hard to put this narrative out and to, people think it's a sad story. Who wants to read such a story, like it's going to just bring people down or something. And I'm like, no,
Exactly.
it's about survival. We all are surviving, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's hope.
And I think when you write about yourself, then that I think they can't able to digest the raw truths of life of someone. Like they even try to alter that as well कि नहीं ये ठीक नहीं है ये ठीक नहीं है आप यहाँ से इसको काटो, like that's, I think that's
Also,
insensitive.
we are so used to inspiration porn now. We are so used to
Yeah,
that
It
narrative
has
of
to be happy ending.
overcoming. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
overcoming. There is
Yeah.
always an arc of overcoming. There's no like vulnerability in it.
Yeah.
So, and that is one of the biggest problems with that able-bodied gaze.
One of the corporates called me and they said, "Can you come and inspire our employees?" I'm like, what? What's
I can
inspiring?
just throw truth bombs.
Yeah, how you overcame your disability. I'm like, I don't overcome a disability. I'm just living with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, do you guys believe if, like, this heteronorm, like the heterosexuals, if I say, if they talk about our stories or if they take a stand for our community, does that make any difference, like in the society? Because it's just like it's mainly us people, like it's mainly our people who just take stand, who just talk about, mainly talk about our community. So,
We have to realize that we all of us, disabled queer people, we occupy a very small space within the social discourse.
Yeah.
In Instagram might make us believe that we are like at the center of it,
hmm,
but we are not. We are really not. So when you talk about heteronormative people, able-bodied people talking about our narratives, it doesn't matter. Like as Vaishali said, for everyone, we are just a niche. We
Yeah.
are just a niche. We don't want to be in the niche. Ideally, we want to be heard. We want to be talked about, and our issues should be equally important in the larger social discourse. It isn't right now. It isn't. So it doesn't matter who is talking. It's a lot of performance. A
Yeah.
lot of solidarity is performance these days. It's about, okay, let me show that, I'm an
yeah.
ally, or let me show that I
Hmm.
I have empathy. And true empathy for me is always unspoken. It should not be require any kind of performance. But it is always these days, in the days of social media, of course, everything is performance. So
Yeah,
Yeah, like they think that they are being cool, or they are being like they'll be famous for it to
I'm
be
too
an
old
ally.
to actually even be like recognize that fame of social media. So I'm like, okay, that's fine, matlab, whatever. But it's also like, it's too. How is it cool, dude? Matlab, I live in a small town. If my all my identities make it worse for me, nothing becomes better by embracing my identity or wearing it on my label. And it's despite that I wear it, but I would rather not do it. I'm still like I live in Patna. I'm
Hmm.
still afraid of doing a lot of assertive things which sound very cool, but actually makes life dangerous for me because I live alone in that city, and it makes life dangerous. Like I am threatened by the idea that people, if because people are hostile to the to identities which are vulnerable.
yeah. We are putting our lives at risk by talking about who we are,
Mm.
especially in the current political climate where, if you're not a certain person, you're really already marginalized. And it does put a target on your back when you're trying to, tell your own story, which it shouldn't be that like that. But then again, the othering that happens with our identities. The only way we'll come to the mainstream is for people to take us seriously and to listen to
I
us.
think I think the I don't know if it's that's effective, but I think the Supreme Court verdict, I think if that go well, so maybe
I don't
we'll,
have hopes for
yeah,
that at all.
same. So maybe then we will have that stand in the society. But again, I also don't have any hope for that,
Nothing's gonna
because
happen.
ultimately it's about the country, like the central government thing. They have to approve that. So yeah, it's not a topic at all.
Yeah, our lives will be over just fighting. I just accepted that. I think it's easier to like not live in that hope of somebody coming and giving us our rights and finally us being able to live our lives. I think it's important to just find those, be resourceful and find those ways you can,
Yeah,
surpass all of these.
and just live in your that
Yeah,
small world where you're happy, because if you see the larger one, then there is nothing,
no
I think,
point
like
waiting for
of that
that.
sort. Yeah,
Yeah.
true. Okay, so let's come to this question. It's nice talking to you people, like out of the context. Okay, so in the realm of mental wellness, what broader initiatives or societal shifts do you believe are necessary to create a more inclusive and understanding environment for individuals with diverse identities and experiences? Like, even though we
I
don't,
think
yeah,
I think more people everywhere, more people understanding. I think more people. The minute any institution has more queer disabled people, they're certainly their understanding, or at least performative understanding of what it is, how to actually approach disability or queerness or mental health improves. So I think believing and giving people voice who are actually marginalized, who are actually uh, you know on the fringe, and whose voices need to be heard. And that is the most important aspect of uh, to give them the mic. What happens is, like, generally it's so difficult for people to pass on the mic to individuals who actually whose voice matters. So I think that would be the first step, and the second step would be to listen to them. If
yeah,
people ask me what to or how do we approach disabled people, I think one of the basic thing you can do is you can go and ask them, what is it? Do they need help? Do they don't need help? Some people need help, some people don't need help, some people um, everyone has different experiences. So you should ask them instead of just treating them as some kind of a stereotype. Everyone has individuality, and of course at the societal institutional level, just include as many as diverse people from diverse identities. At the same time, care about marginalities within caste, gender, and if even disability, for example. Like many of the disability programs don't include deaf people, and because deaf has a different, it becomes a certain type of different culture, uh, because uh, because most disability organization now they do have interpreters and everything, but most classrooms, universities and things like that and offices don't have interpreters. So a lot of disabled people also there needs to be much more representation across disability, and invisible disability for example needs to be talked about, and all kinds of chronic pain, things like that are very disabling. It's just that because they have not been recognized by the government, it doesn't mean that they should not be talked about. But the
Yeah.
best way forward is to give them space, let them, you know, give them space to create a discourse, give disabled people, queer people, Dalit people, everyone, give them the stage to create a discourse. You pass on the mic instead of just hogging it.
Very true. So I moving out of literary identity, I also work in a corporate environment. And over here, people have realized that having a diverse team, let's say, creates more innovation. Like
Mm.
there is consensus on that being a fact. But then when they're trying to create these diverse teams, what they're doing is it's the cis head men
Mm.
sitting on a table, like sitting around a table and thinking how we can create a diverse space, and they'll hire some disabled people, they'll hire some queer people, and they will not give these people the kind of tools they need to
Yeah.
succeed. And then they'll say, oh, but we tried, it didn't work. So what we need is a seat at the table where we can define how an environment needs to be for us to thrive. Like you
Yeah.
can't bring queer people in and not give us gender neutral toilets and not give us the insurance benefits we need so that our partner is part of our family, not give us the visibility we need so we can talk about our personal lives out loud. And same with disabled people, you can't not give us those aids we need so that we can literally come into the office. Is there a ramp where people who use wheelchairs can come in? There's so many things that a cis het man able-bodied person won't be able to figure out because they have no idea what these identities are like. So we need to give power to these minorities so we can then define what it is that we need and then create an environment that's inclusive and then bring people in. And I think most people don't realize it's that much of, work that needs to go in. And
Yeah.
so that, we see that, it's all tokenism that we see.
Yeah, generally stops at tokenism because everything it's tokenism is simple to do. You just have one tokenistic person, and
Yeah,
then have a diversity award which you give to that
yeah,
person every year and say we are the most diverse team.
yeah,
And then some NGO will also give you the award for being the most diverse organization.
yeah,
And it's I've seen this and it's so funny. There was someone who worked at a corporate and he was disabled. He was the wheelchair user, and so their organization was given an award for being so diverse. I went and asked them, is it really very good? So they said, no, actually, I have to pay for my carer within the office.
yeah,
Within the office
imagine.
yeah. And then also these people are going and taking awards and being the most diverse space.
Like
There are only
they.
only two
Interesting.
percent of disabled people are employed in the corporate sector.
Yeah,
That is also an overestimation, I think, because generally these because everything diversity, they need to show diversity. But
yeah,
the point is, even now most of the diversity teams have one token disabled or queer person, and they will have no voice within
yeah,
their structure. They will
exactly.
have like they're consultants, they're hired consultants. They will not have even job security.
Yeah,
How will they make it more diverse if they don't have job security themselves? They will just do PPTs and do events and whatever suits them,
yeah.
inspire people.
Exactly. And it's also about the visible part of diversity, right? It's about how visible
Yeah,
you are.
exactly.
And
How visible,
Yeah.
exactly. In fact, I'm quite afraid of this. I don't use a wheelchair. I These days I'm using a crutch. So but whenever I use a wheelchair, I'm quite afraid that someone will take a picture and make me the
yeah,
inspiration. And these days
exactly.
so many people with cameras are moving around, making you an inspiration of like all kinds of inspiration you are giving to people without even meaning to.
It must be exhausting, right? Like, I
It
don't
is very
want to
exhausting.
be, I don't want to make other people inspire. I just want to live my life and I just want
but
to do my
but a
work.
lot of disabled people enjoy that validation also. So I don't, and I
Mm.
don't blame them also. Like a lot of disabled people live lives which are very secluded within their own homes, don't get a lot of validation. So when they get awards, when they get all this, I'm not, I will never do that, but I accept. Like I can understand why people do it. That's okay. But for the society, because but the society is also expects every disabled person to do that. After that,
Yeah,
it becomes part of the culture that everyone is supposed to, despite being disabled, you despite being
Yeah,
dyslexic,
exactly. Yeah,
that is like why, man.
so
I was
annoying.
like,
despite.
And
Here,
there's also that thing, right? Like, I am better than you when they're saying
yeah,
that,
exactly,
and
exactly.
that's the
yeah,
They are
problem.
actually saying that I
Yeah,
am better than you. No matter what you do, you are, everything you do is basically even in literature. I'm sure, like we have written books, but we will always be like, special category people.
yeah,
You know, we
exactly.
will always be special. Special mentions that K. Vaishali wrote a book and Abhishek Anicca wrote a book. We will never be like mainstream that this person wrote a very good book,
yeah.
Yeah,
despite no matter how good the book is.
yeah, exactly.
You don't get the despite word where it's needed.
So
Like
I
they,
think in literary circles that would be that is the biggest tragedy that I'm foreseeing already. So I'm trying to just write another something else and move on from this, because I know
Yeah,
this is going to happen. And as soon as the entire thing started, I had a feeling that this will happen, because no matter how good a book you are, path breaking you book a book you write, and in that sense, I think both our books, nothing like that this has been written before. Most of the
yeah,
books you find on disability are people are written by caregivers, or,
yeah.
hmm,
and even if there are few,
Parents,
yeah,
teachers,
and
yeah,
yeah, and even if there are a few like from Malni Chiv or whoever, Fidas Kanga, they are very niche books. Very few people have read them. Very few people have. They're mostly talked about in academic circles.
yeah,
So, and the reason I wanted to write is because I want able-bodied mainstream people to read about disability, to actually see what it feels like to live with a disability and illness every day. To navigate my life. Most of us imagine that we have landed in a place, like, oh, you have done this. It's an arc. Like people are meet us at the completion of the arc. But I want to tell people about the journey, every day. What is it every day?
yeah,
And with me, it was
yeah,
also being a lot of it was being vulnerable, because firstly, I had to accept that I wear a diaper. I have incontinence issues. I fall a lot. When I used to walk with a crutch, even then I used to fall a lot. So mobility issues were a lot of things. So a lot of things which I had to accept first, and then I could talk about it. And I
mm,
wanted to talk about these things because these are important. Many disabled people wear diapers, but no one talks. You will not hear anyone talking about it, because it makes people so awkward and afraid that,
yeah.
and
True.
what it does to sexuality, even in queer circles. Yeah, what it does to sexuality. How do you think queer people, judge? They will say nice things, but how do you feel they feel? What happens to attraction and desire when they imagine a person who has incontinence, who is not capable of doing a lot of things which in their imagination happens to be pleasure seeking behavior? So yeah, a lot of these things are became very like, it became essential, for me to talk about them through any means, and eventually it became a book. But it became it, yeah, and I hope for me and for Vaishali that more normative able-bodied people read our books, so that
yeah,
they actually, we don't need to preach to the converted. we
yeah,
we have been doing that anyways. We have our own things which we there is enough anyways. People consume that, through Instagram or whatever. But we need other people also to read and actually acknowledge, if
yeah,
not,
Hmm.
empathize.
yeah. And Abhishek,
Yeah,
I really feel your whole, this is who we are now. Like, we are a queer writer, a disabled writer, and to write fiction after this, where we are talking about something else, it's going to be such a But I feel like, I'm comfortable in this niche. I feel like because nobody's telling our stories, I rather like just crank out
Yeah,
books when telling my story again and
yeah,
again.
that would be. I think I would revisit the genre in around 20 years, but I think also like I don't want to overdo it because it's also a very traumatic process
That's
to
true. Yeah.
just relive everything which has happened to
Yeah.
you, and every day to recount everything traumatic which has happened to you and your body,
Yeah.
and things it also makes you hate nostalgia because you see like when you didn't have that awareness, you thought of yourself as an able-bodied person, and you had different ideas of romance and love and work and productivity, and you tend to question all of that, which is a very good thing for this, for writing. But internally it's a very haunting thing because you would never be able to be the same person. You will never be, because that life, you understand the privileges that and bodily privilege brings with you.
Mhm.
Simple bodily mind privilege brings to you, simple societal privileges which you get by being able bodied.
Very true. It was
Actually,
quite
that
dramatic to write my book as well. Like I think, living through those hard moments and
Yeah,
also finding the courage to talk about them and knowing that you'll be judged for, different things you say. And I think the hardest thing is, when people shrug it off as like, okay, so what? It's like,
exactly.
I didn't write this book, so you can say so what? It's like really,
My
it's
people will go come and say to you, everyone has problems,
yeah,
everyone.
oh,
This
that's
is
the
my
worst.
favorite. Yeah, this is my favorite. Even the best able-bodied people with the best kind of intention, they will come to you. Everyone has problems. You have your own, and I've been. No, no, dude. Like you are not discriminated every day. Like
you're
don't have
not
to be play
othered.
an. Yeah, you are
Yeah,
not other. You don't have to play an activist every day. You
yeah,
don't have to go to a simple restaurant or something and find someone discriminating against you, or go to an office, or go to a school, go to a college, and finds you are being harassed because of who you are.
Yeah,
That is very different from you having not having a soulmate, not finding a soulmate, or not having a good experience with your boss or something like that. Your experience, I'm sure, like, it is very traumatic for you, but please don't bring our experiences like they count for nothing, because just because you don't want to actually acknowledge that you are
exactly.
part of
yeah,
this system. You are
yeah,
part of the able-bodied normative system, heteronormative system, which actually actively discriminates against us. So
yeah.
no one wants to be the bad person. No one wants to acknowledge that they are part of that system which constantly discriminates against us.
Very true.
And I think that question in general, like everyone has their problem, is very very annoying. Like, how do you like you just uh, said to the other person that your problem is just a part of your life, or just a part of the, like, it's just a part, but that's really pretty annoying because everyone is again going through their own struggles. And like, we need to be kind. If not, like, if you don't know what to say, then I think just don't say. Like, that's a very old saying.
Yeah,
But people just, they just need to like throw advices on your faces, and they just need to, make you feel better. But most of the times that's not what we need.
Yeah, everyone thinks
Just,
that they have some kind of life experience to
yeah,
actually talk about us, but they
yeah,
don't. They don't have it because it is really because even temporary illness or temporary disability makes them, curse everything. I hate everything about their life, and so they don't understand, if they're supposedly, if they are misgendered ones, or if they're even their masculinity or femininity is questioned, they get so, pissed off. Ki
yeah.
how dare they? And for us it's like everyday experience of, are you a man enough, are you a woman enough, are you
hmm.
a uh, whatever. And it's like every day it's like, we have those experiences. And even after book I continue sharing my dating experience because they are very funny, because the able-bodied people don't know how to react to you. They will match by mistake, and then they will see the disabled person with a crutch, and then they don't know how to react. So they'll say, you are an inspiration for being here. I said, why am I an inspiration for being on a dating site? Tell me, like, seriously, what have I achieved by being on a dating site?
Oh, you're
I just,
putting yourself out there, and like apparently that's very inspiring.
What am I supposed to do? Dig a hole
I
and
know,
bury
right?
myself in it?
Yeah, people don't
I
know
just
what to
want
do
to
with
date
us.
people.
Yeah.
Either like me or go. But
E-
yeah.
Either we are inspiration or we are trivial. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
in between most of the times. It's so hard. And then, people come and ask me what is dyslexia. And I have to be like a sort of dictionary and a Wikipedia telling them what it is. And you can easily
Oh,
Google this thing, right?
it must be like there is a Hindi film, Tare Zameen for something, which was a very horrible film about,
Very
you
horrible.
know, yeah. And I saw someone celebrating it as a path-breaking film, and I was telling them, every disabled person, every dyslexic person definitely hates that film, because
Yeah.
after that, every parent went to their doctor to get their child identified and find some inspirational thing, which they
Yeah.
could do. It's so like useless. But that's the discourse in our country. Able bodied discourse is always like that. It's like, but we have to acknowledge what their ability is.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Just the word differently able irks me. Like, what is that? How am I
And
different?
and we have to fight those labels every day. Like everyone, one random
We
person will
didn't
say,
decide those labels anyway,
yeah,
really.
I
Somebody else
have now
tried.
stopped. I have now stopped explaining things to them. Say whatever you want to. You can call me a cripple. It's okay, but your intention should be in the right place. But
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, because all of these fancy terms, which everything was created to serve the social sector in some ways. Because they wanted a more polished approach towards disability, even though it serves very few of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think yeah, that's the whole thing. And because the discourse is so, there's such a big gap between the discourse which is in America or UK and the discourse here. Like I was just watching a show, British Bake Off, yesterday, and saw that they had a sign language interpreter in the Bake Off tent, and I was and here we don't even have it in schools and colleges. So yeah.
Yeah.
More and more work need to be done in this country.
For sure.
Okay, so like my next question was that only like what the readers can take from your books, but I think you both have sort of covered that topic for us. So okay, so let's jump into the individual questions. For first is for K. Vaishali. So living in Hyderabad and pursuing your masters, how has your academic journey intersected with your personal experiences, and what role has it played in shaping your understanding of mental wellness in a diverse society?
So I don't know, like I think, just the thought of a university makes me like gets my anxiety through the roof. It is, I mean, we think that schools and colleges are safe spaces, but they're anything but. And I went to University of Hyderabad where, Rohit Wamala had to take that drastic step that he did because of how much the academic, the VCs and all those people had made his life miserable. And, that is, I can't even imagine what he must have gone through. But, for me also, when I go to these colleges and, I just see that I have to fit into their idea of what learned is and what knowing knowledge is. And that has never been easy for me. And I have had to, I failed a year in school. I dropped out of two courses in bachelor's. I dropped out of one course in master's. I have spent like 8, 9 years wasted in these institutions. And every time, even now, if I have to go back to a university for whatever reason, I just feel that anxiety, like I feel like, I have to change who I am. And a lot of people actually think universities are safe spaces. And, just that thought that anyone could think that is just so weird. Even being queer, right? So I was living in the hostel when I was doing my master's. I had to be in the closet the entire 2 years because I knew the moment I would even utter the word lesbian, I would be thrown out of the hostel. And that actually happened to someone in Banaras in the university. There was a girl who was, I think she had like a disability as well, like she was partially blind or something. and they've just suspected that she's lesbian. She didn't even say that she's lesbian, and they threw her out of the hostel. And this was at a time in my life when my parents were also not really talking to me. So it's not like I could have gone back to them and stayed in their house. So the university was the only place I could stay in. So, I had to be closeted for 2 years and it was hell. And I mean, not that I didn't feel like I didn't have the freedom to talk about my identities, and that's why it was hell. It was more like, what if I get outed, because I am who I am. And I did have a girlfriend those 2 years. So, meeting her and being with her was such a vulnerable thing at that time because it was constantly worrying that we would be outed and thrown out and our parents will find out and we will literally be you know thrown out of everything we know. And yeah, I think these places are not safe, not for people of uh people of queer identities, disabled, caste. It's not safe for anyone, and it's bad because this needs to be a safe space because a lot of people are exploring these identities. Like college is where most people start dating, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And college is important to have a good life. How would you do well in life without getting a degree, right? It's not
Yeah.
possible in India. Uh, so I just can't understand how we have such spaces in academic spaces that are so, like, where it's so difficult to be yourself. And my understanding there was, I just have to get my degree, get the hell out of here, like, just, if I care about myself, I just have to like finish whatever degree that'll get me a good job and just like, just move out. So it's sad. I think we need better universities, but things are getting worse now,
Yeah.
with the rise in Hindutva in these spaces. But yeah.
yeah. But do you think like the today's generation, like they are more open up and they are more accepting towards?
No.
Oh,
No, actually, the hate as like the hate campaign that the government in power is doing is actually working. A lot of people are now more intolerant towards identities that are not theirs,
Yeah.
and because the majority, unfortunately, people are Hindu, and they are cishet, and many these spaces are full of such people. There is very little tolerance towards others, and it's getting worse and worse. Uh, but these people are getting empowered, which is why it's getting. I mean, they were always there, but I feel like being tolerant was appreciated before. Now it's not appreciated anymore. So I feel like
yeah,
these people are empowered to uh, say whatever they want, and even like spaces like Instagram and all, right? Like we see
Yeah.
like recent the case that happened where a child was bullied, 17-year-old child was bullied on Instagram for being trans. And it's just unthinkable. Like, where do we go, right? Like, outside of my home, where do I go?
that's sad. And yeah, I also have that fear, like what is, like what's next? Like what's our future?
Yeah.
Like for our community, what's our future? So like
There's
it's,
nothing. There's no space. We need a space. That's all.
yeah,
Like I got called a retard on Instagram for no reason. I was just posting about being dyslexic, and they were like, "Oh, this person is a retard or whatever." Like, I mean, it's so weird to be called that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've stopped posting after that. It's just not my space.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I think a lot of abuse, which I think disabled people get as soon as any of their reels go viral, the kind of hate, dank
hmm,
comments and hate they get. It's shocking. And I'm very afraid, very conscious of putting anything. I used to put some reels also, but now I don't do that because I'm very conscious of all these young 15-year-old being tank on my profile
Yeah.
and saying very hurtful things to you because they don't have any filters, and society isn't going to teach them anything about disability, and they are riding on it. They are completely like
yeah,
everything. Every institution supports this, encourages this bullying.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Being a
it's
woman
become
is
much harder.
hard. Like
Being a
misogyny
yeah,
is so
woman,
cool
just
now.
being, yeah, yeah.
It's like
Like,
an identity that was given to me when I was born. Like I didn't do anything to
Yeah,
have this identity. And so many ideas of what a woman should be. And if you're even slightly deviating, even if you're,
yeah,
completely conforming to their idea of a
yeah,
woman,
yeah,
you
yeah,
still get harassed.
yeah, completely.
Impossible.
like, do you know about Trinetra?
Yeah.
Like,
Uh,
she's a famous. So, like, she also shares about her struggles and like whatever the comments and messages she gets, and it's horrible. It's just like I can't able to read the full carousel which she sometimes posts or the stories she shares on her Instagram. It's quite horrible. Like she's I like we all are doing great in our lives, and we all are somehow putting efforts to be better, to be a better person. Forget like our identity and our skills or our work comes secondary, but we as a person are doing like good things and everything, but people don't see that. People don't see the actual, like the general things of ourselves. They just point out they just point out the things which they don't understand, and instead of instead of understanding them, they just make fun of them, or they just belittle other people. So that's really insensitive, and I think just goes like like that's a world problem, I think.
Yeah. I just think you shouldn't allow children in spaces where children get bullied, right? I mean,
yeah,
unfortunately,
completely.
that's exactly where children end up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Schools, social
And
media.
even the bullies are children, by the way.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
the bullies are children. So
exactly.
they have just taken out the school bullying part to Instagram and social spaces.
Yeah,
And now they can feel empowered to bully anyone because they have nothing to lose.
yeah.
They don't have an identity right yet. They are just mocking people beneath, an anonymous account
They don't even
underneath
get
an account.
blocked or anything. It's not like they have to
Yeah,
create new accounts. They use the same account.
Instagram takes no action against people. I was once hazed by a group of people, and they were all, I think, based outside India, and they were a hazing group apparently, South
Wow.
Asians only. And so at that point of time, I didn't know how to, block my chats to external thing. So I added to a group chat and then hazed for around 15 minutes. And it was bizarre because this was for an article I wrote for Agents of Ish,
Wow.
and it was like surreal because this could happen in this world, and there are like people who would just bully you, haze you for writing a piece, and they have nothing to do with just want to haze people.
Yeah. It's fun apparently for them.
Yeah,
I can't even imagine how I was bullied in school, and it's just something nobody cares about anymore.
yeah,
I told my parents, they don't care. They're like, yeah, that's what happens when you're fat.
exactly.
It's just part of life. You just have to deal with it. Why should I deal with anything? Why is someone making me feel bad about my body? They don't deserve to do that. They have no
Yeah,
say in my life. They have no power, but they did, and it's just weird, to be in these spaces. I
yeah.
hope and pray for safe spaces, but I know they're not gonna come manifest
Prop up.
from my
Yeah,
from my
it's a
hoping.
societal change. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, do you guys have like a supportive friends group, like where you can vent to, or where you can share your things?
Yeah, not a group, but yeah, I have friends who don't know each other. But yeah, they're different identities that, each of them understands. I guess that's what happens when you are like in this intersection. I don't think there are many people who are having the same experience in that holistic way.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think all experiences are unique that way. It's very difficult to share after a point,
yeah,
and it's very difficult to actually, empathy has its limitations. It's a very good tool, but it has its limitations, and one of the limitations is that everyone has different lived reality and experience, and you can share a little bit. And
yeah,
I think sharing through writing is a beautiful thing. That is, I think that is the
very
because
powerful.
it's very powerful, and it's also very, you're not worried about the immediate response of, you are the immediate question, so you can allow yourself to write about whatever you want. You are
Yeah,
in control,
yeah,
and that's why actually books are a very good medium.
yeah. And you can connect the dots
Yeah,
with a lot of leisure.
yeah,
And I think that's one of the things I would love the writers, to the readers also. Like, as I connect my dots,
Uh,
I hope that helps you connect your dots. Even though we might not have the same identities,
yeah,
we still live
exactly.
in this world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got
So,
it.
like Abhishek, I have a question for you
Uh,
for that. So, your poetry has found a home in various publications. How does the poetic form allow you to express different dimensions of your identity and experiences that prose may not capture? And are there any specific themes you find resonate more powerfully through your poetry?
I think poetry also is for me is a it's a process of just understanding myself, my body, my space, time, just to put myself in a particular setting and understanding the places around it and talking about them, talking about my body. So in fact, my prose till now at least has been an extension of my poetry, and my poetry largely focuses on uh, my everyday life, and my everyday life is about being a disabled person, about questions of masculinity, about all of that. So I have written poems which are around these themes, and it's also very therapeutic. Narrative therapy has this, as she said, Vaishali said, it's a very nice way to do it. I think I was in I was in hospital. I just out of ICU after COVID, and I was in the general ward. I had been shifted to the general ward, and I wrote a poem in a hospital because that is the only thing I thought which would make me hopeful about life and which would put things into perspective. So I wrote a poem about a nurse pricking me in the IVs and me bleeding. So it is also a surreal experience because you are in a hospital and you were critical for 12 days. I was in ICU, so you are also trying to figure out, and a poem is always a very good way to, you know there is an inner strength which you gather together and
Yeah.
tell yourself that there is another day to be lived. There is some hope at the end of the tunnel. That's a very good thing. I think poems make me very hopeful. And despite my poems being very sad and depressing at times, they make me hopeful. Writing them makes me hopeful. Even sad poems make me hopeful. And it's not surprising actually because all of us love sad songs. All of sad songs are part of the places where I come from. Uh, Public transport still plays Kumar Sanu songs of
Yeah.
the 90s. So it's not surprising that they resonate, within us, and that's why I think it makes us hopeful because it makes us look beyond the moment, and in the moment we might not feel that well. We might feel that we might turn out to be nothing. So poetry for me is publication is part of being a writer, and it's always, of course, it's important, but it's also very irritating because I'm sure Vaishali has the same experience because when you are sending things which are different, then you are immediately categorized. Either you are accepted because you will become a niche writer, or you will become, it is a disability rights poem or something like that, or 3 poems, 4 poems for disability rights month or something like that, or you will be rejected. Rejection happens often because people don't get it. You writing about your body, the sense of it, people apparently get people writing about beautiful things which they haven't seen, like you know trees, wonderful trees or birds or animals. Like most of the canon of poetry which is popular in Instagram these days, Mary Oliver or Emily Dickinson, they are, I love them. I love those poems. But the thing is, today's editor, when they are choosing those poems, they, of course, they love those poems, but when you can't write about those poems sitting here and in these concrete cities. You can find beauty, but you can't find the same kind of beauty which, beauty is also. And poetry is not only about beauty. There's a lot of catharsis. Emily Dickinson wrote for so many years. She published only one or two poems throughout her life, and then everything was published post her death. And now you know she's apparently the hottest lesbian poet of that century, and Apple even made a show on her. So, but to put it into perspective, she lived a very lonely life. She was probably alienated. She was couldn't express herself, and she wrote that in her poetry. And it's part of the journey of life. I think uh, people who are different often find that their narratives remain unfulfilled throughout their lives, and generally people are waiting for them to die or something to the narratives being completed. But I think that's why we take the power from them and tell our own stories in our lifetime and talk about it, so that
Yeah.
we don't have to wait. We don't give them the chance to, that let's wait for them to die and then we'll say that they were such a great writer. So yeah, we'll just go and fight with people and say, no, you have to listen to us. Our poems are also important. Our writing is also important. It is mainstream. It is very much part of the society. It is very much part of the literary canon. It's just that you haven't read that kind of.
Yeah.
People have. It's just because people haven't read poetry or prose, which are by disabled people. They haven't celebrated it. Uh, there are lots of disabled writers who have never been celebrated. There was a poem by William Wallace Henry called you know, invisible name, invincible or something. It was a very famous poem. So, but it's not being celebrated as a disabled poem, right? Or by a
I
poem by
think
a.
लोगों को ये लगता है कि ये लोग ऐसे कर कैसे सकते हैं, like they are just in
So poem
disbelief.
is Invictus. Invictus, it's very very famous poem. A film was made on it. Nelson Mandela apparently, Pierce Morgan read the poem, but it's by a disabled person who wore crutches throughout his life. But no one identifies with that poem as a written by a disabled poem. If you read that as a poem written by a disabled poem, it will make more sense. Invictus will make much more sense because that person is knows what it is to struggle every day with your own body. And but that's not celebrated as a disability poem. A lot of things which are disability we don't often see, like, because we are very, like, in terms of percentages, in terms of population, we are not counted as someone. Now in Western countries, of course, it's being done. In India, it's not done yet. So there's a long way to go. But it's also like, what is literary canon for you is also defined by your own worldview, and your own worldview is defined by able-bodiedness, by heteronormativity, by you're just being normal and accepted. Your being normal and accepted becomes your entire idea of what literature is, what reading is, what writing is. And that becomes the institutional parameters, also societal parameters also. So yeah,
Like,
that is something, that is an uphill battle, but we'll keep writing. Yeah.
it's been great talking to you, talking to both of you. I got a lot of relatable stuff from both of you, and I shared my own as well. So like it was a very insightful talking, and I really really wish like your future work and your future like identities will be recognized in the society and your voice will matter. So yeah, thank you again for coming, and like it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.